the heart of a bustling city filled with towering skyscrapers and endless energy, there lived a young woman named Maya Thompson. She was someone who stood out, not just because she carried herself with quiet confidence, but also because of her sharp mind and unwavering sense of justice. Maya had worked hard to get where she was, climbing the ranks in the legal world while staying true to her values. Her reputation as a brilliant lawyer and an advocate for fairness preceded her, making her a respected name among peers and colleagues. One crisp morning, as Maya sipped her coffee at her favorite cafe, her phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line caught her attention immediately. Invitation to join our advisory board. Intrigued, she opened it and read through the message carefully. It was from one of the most prestigious tech startups in the industry, a company known for its cutting-edge innovations and rapid growth. They wanted her on their advisory board. At first, Maya couldn't believe it. Why would such a high-profile company reach out to her? Was this real, or was it too good to be true? She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen as thoughts raced through her mind. On one hand, this could be the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to influence decisions at the highest level and make a real impact. On the other hand, something about it felt off. Maya had seen enough in her career to know that not every golden opportunity came without strings attached. Still, she decided to give it a shot. After all, if she turned down the offer outright, she'd never know what lay behind the polished invitation. A few days later, Maya found herself stepping into the sleek glass building that housed the startup's headquarters. The lobby alone screamed luxury: marble floors, minimalist furniture, and employees buzzing around with purpose. As she made her way to the conference room, she noticed how everyone seemed so confident, almost untouchable. There was an air of exclusivity here, as though only the best of the best belonged inside these walls. The meeting began with introductions, and Maya quickly realized she was the odd one out. Most of the people seated around the table were older, wealthier, and predominantly white men. Their tailored suits and expensive watches spoke volumes about their status. Then there was Ethan Caldwell, the CEO, who greeted her warmly with a charming smile. He shook her hand firmly, his tone dripping with enthusiasm. "We're thrilled to have you join us, Maya," he said, his words smooth and practiced. "Your perspective is exactly what we need." Despite his friendly demeanor, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan's charm was calculated, a tool designed to win people over. She nodded politely, keeping her guard up. When the discussion turned to logistics, Ethan slid a thick folder across the table toward her. Inside were pages upon pages of contracts, policies, and agreements. "Take your time to review these," he said casually, as though it were no big deal. But Maya knew better. Contracts like these often contained hidden traps, buried deep within paragraphs of legalese. As the meeting progressed, Maya listened intently, observing the dynamics between the executives. They laughed at each other's jokes, exchanged knowing glances, and spoke in jargon that might have intimidated someone less experienced. Yet Maya remained unfazed. She took notes diligently, jotting down questions and marking sections of the contract she intended to revisit later. By the end of the session, she left the building feeling both intrigued and cautious. Something about the atmosphere and Ethan's overly polished demeanor left her uneasy. That evening, Maya sat at her kitchen table, the contract spread out before her. A cup of tea steamed beside her as she flipped through the pages, her brow furrowing with each passing minute. The language was dense, deliberately complex, and riddled with clauses that seemed harmless at first glance but hinted at something more sinister upon closer inspection. One particular section caught her eye, a clause granting the company sweeping authority to silence advisors who discussed internal matters publicly. In simpler terms, it meant anyone speaking out against the company could face serious consequences. Maya paused, her pen hovering over the page. She had seen clauses like this before, tucked away in contracts meant to protect powerful entities from scrutiny. This wasn't just about protecting proprietary information, it was about control. Whoever signed this agreement would essentially forfeit their right to speak freely about anything related to the company. For someone like Maya, who valued transparency and accountability, this was unacceptable. Her mind wandered back to the meeting earlier that day. Ethan's smile replayed in her head, now tinged with a hint of insincerity. What was he hiding, and why did he think she wouldn't notice? Determined to dig deeper, Maya highlighted the problematic clause and made a mental note to address it at the next meeting. If there was one thing Maya knew, it was that silence only benefited those in power. She wasn't about to let them silence her, not without a fight. The next few days were a whirlwind for Maya. She couldn't stop thinking about the contract and the unsettling clause she had uncovered. It gnawed at her, like an itch she couldn't scratch. Determined to understand the full scope of what she was dealing with, she decided to dig deeper. Late at night, when the city outside her window was quiet and the hum of traffic had faded into a distant murmur, Maya sat at her desk with a fresh cup of coffee. The stack of papers from the contract lay in front of her, illuminated by the soft glow of her desk lamp. Her red pen hovered over the pages, ready to dissect every word. As she reread the document more carefully this time, Maya realized just how cleverly the problematic clauses were hidden. They weren't blatant or obvious. Instead, they were buried under layers of legal jargon, almost as if someone had deliberately made them difficult to spot. For example, one section talked about confidentiality agreements in vague terms, while another referenced non-disclosure obligations, without clearly defining their limits. To the untrained eye, these might have seemed like standard corporate safeguards, but Maya knew better. These weren't protections, they were traps, designed to muzzle anyone who dared to speak out. Her heart sank as she imagined the implications. If she signed this contract, she would essentially be giving up her right to voice concerns about unethical practices within the company. And worse still, it wasn't just her. It applied to everyone on the advisory board. What if something went wrong? What if the company engaged in behavior that hurt its employees, customers, or even the public? Would anyone be allowed to say anything? The thought sent a chill down her spine. By the time she finished reviewing the contract, Maya felt a mix of anger and determination bubbling inside her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing up for what was right. She reminded herself why she had chosen this path in the first place: to fight for fairness, transparency, and accountability. Sitting back and letting this slide wasn't an option. She resolved to bring the issue to light, no matter the consequences. When the day of the next meeting arrived, Maya walked into the conference room with purpose. She carried a printed copy of the contract, now marked with annotations and highlighted sections. As she took her seat, she glanced around the table. Ethan Caldwell greeted her with his usual smile, but today it felt colder somehow, as though he sensed trouble brewing. The other executives exchanged casual pleasantries, oblivious to the storm Maya was about to unleash. Once everyone settled in, Ethan kicked off the meeting with his characteristic charm. "All right, team," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Let's dive into our agenda for today." His tone was confident, almost dismissive, as though he expected everything to go smoothly. But Maya wasn't going to let him get away with it. When there was a brief lull in the conversation, she spoke up. "Before we proceed," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I'd like to address something I noticed in the contract." All eyes turned to her, some curious, others indifferent. Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard but trying not to show it. "Go ahead, Maya," he said, gesturing for her to continue. Maya placed the annotated contract on the table and flipped to the page containing the troubling clause. "This section here," she said, pointing to the highlighted text, "grants the company significant authority to restrict advisors from discussing internal matters publicly. Essentially, it silences us if we ever want to raise concerns about anything happening within the organization." For a moment, the room fell silent. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning overhead. Then, one of the executives chuckled nervously. "Oh, that's just standard legal language," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's there to protect proprietary information, nothing to worry about." But Maya wasn't convinced. "With all due respect," she replied, looking directly at Ethan, "this isn't just about protecting trade secrets. This clause is broad enough to cover anything, even issues that affect employees, stakeholders, or the public. It's a trap, plain and simple. Ethan's smile faltered for the briefest second before he recovered, plastering on a look of reassurance. Maya, I understand your concern, he said smoothly, but I assure you, this is completely routine. We've included similar clauses in contracts for years. It's nothing personal. His response only fueled Maya's resolve. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. Routine or not, it's unacceptable. Transparency is critical, especially for a company with as much influence as yours. If we can't speak openly about potential problems, how can we hold ourselves, or you, accountable? The tension in the room thickened. Some of the executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Others looked annoyed, as though Maya's objections were inconvenient. Ethan, however, remained composed, though his smile now seemed forced. He attempted to pivot the conversation, steering it back to safer topics, but Maya wasn't backing down. I'm not asking for permission to criticize the company recklessly, she clarified, addressing the group. I'm asking for clarity and fairness. If this clause stays as it is, it undermines the very purpose of having an advisory board. Our role is to provide honest feedback, not to be silenced when it matters most. Her words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. For a moment it felt as though the entire room held its breath. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Let's table this discussion for now, he suggested, his tone clipped. We'll revisit it later. Maya nodded, knowing full well that later might never come. Still, she had planted a seed. Whether or not the others acknowledged it, she had exposed the truth, and that was a victory in itself. After the meeting ended, Maya lingered behind for a few minutes, gathering her notes. As she packed up her things, one of the other advisors approached her. It was Margaret, a seasoned professional with decades of experience in corporate governance. She gave Maya a small, knowing smile. You handled that well, Margaret said quietly. Not many people would have the courage to call out something like that. Maya sighed, feeling a mix of gratitude and frustration. Thanks, she replied, but I don't think it's enough. Did you see how quickly they tried to brush it aside? Margaret nodded sympathetically. Unfortunately, that's how these things usually play out. But don't underestimate the power of speaking up. Sometimes it takes just one person to start a ripple effect. Those words stayed with Maya as she left the building. Though the battle was far from over, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone. There were others who believed in fairness and justice, even if they weren't ready to step forward yet. And as long as she kept fighting, the ripple effect would grow stronger, one wave at a time. In the days following the meeting, Maya found herself replaying the conversation over and over in her mind. She couldn't shake the image of Ethan's forced smile or the dismissive reactions from the other advisors. It was clear they didn't want to address the issue, not because they didn't see it, but because they were too comfortable with the status quo. For them, rocking the boat wasn't worth the risk. But for Maya, staying silent felt like a betrayal, not just of herself, but of everything she stood for. Determined not to face this alone, Maya decided to reach out to the other members of the advisory board. Surely someone else must have noticed the problematic clause. Maybe they shared her concerns but were hesitant to speak up. One by one, she sent polite emails to each advisor, framing her message as a request for feedback rather than an accusation. I wanted to get your thoughts on a section of the contract, she wrote. Specifically, the confidentiality clause. It seems unusually broad. Do you think it could limit our ability to act as independent voices? The responses trickled in slowly, and they weren't what Maya had hoped for. Some advisors replied, with vague platitudes assuring her that the clause was likely harmless. Others ignored her entirely, leaving her messages unanswered. A few even suggested she let it go. These things are standard, one wrote. It's best not to make waves. Another added, you're new to this world. Trust me, it's better to pick your battles. Reading those replies left Maya feeling isolated and angry. She knew these people weren't stupid. They understood exactly what the clause meant. But instead of pushing back against something unethical, they chose to stay quiet, prioritizing their own comfort and reputations. It was frustrating, but it also deepened her resolve. If no one else was willing to challenge the system, then she would have to do it herself. As the weeks went by, Maya began to notice subtle changes in how the other executives treated her. At first, it was small things, Ethan skipping over her during discussions or cutting her off mid-sentence. Then came the more overt signs of exclusion. Invitations to informal meetings and strategy sessions stopped arriving in her inbox. When she did attend official gatherings, she often found herself relegated to the sidelines, her contributions dismissed or ignored. It was as though they were trying to marginalize her, sending a clear message: fall in line or risk being pushed out. Despite the growing hostility, Maya refused to back down. Instead, she adapted. She started documenting everything, every dismissive comment, every instance of exclusion, every attempt to undermine her authority. She kept meticulous records, saving emails, taking screenshots, and jotting down notes after meetings. These details might not mean much individually, but together, they painted a damning picture of how the company operated behind closed doors. During this time, Maya also reached out to trusted mentors outside the organization. One of them was Dr. Lisa Monroe, a retired attorney who had mentored Maya early in her career. Lisa listened intently as Maya explained the situation, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. When Maya finished, Lisa leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "This isn't just about you," Lisa said finally. "They've created a culture where dissent isn't tolerated, and now that you've spoken up, they see you as a threat." Maya sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know, but I can't just walk away. If I do, nothing will change." Lisa smiled faintly. "And that's why you'll win in the end. People like you, people who refuse to compromise. Their values are the ones who drive real change. But you need to be smart about it. Evidence is key. Keep gathering proof and don't hesitate to share it with others if necessary." Encouraged by Lisa's words, Maya doubled down on her efforts. She began researching similar cases, looking for examples of companies that had faced backlash for oppressive clauses or unethical practices. She discovered several high-profile scandals involving tech startups that had tried to silence whistleblowers or advisors. In some cases, public exposure had led to major reforms or even the downfall of top executives. These stories gave Maya hope. If others had succeeded in holding powerful organizations accountable, so could she. Meanwhile, Ethan's behavior grew increasingly hostile. He seemed determined to make Maya regret challenging him. During one particularly tense meeting, he openly questioned her judgment, implying that her objections stemmed from inexperience rather than genuine concern. "Perhaps we need to reconsider whether this role is the right fit for you." Maya knew it was time to take a stand. The subtle hostility from Ethan and the other executives had escalated into outright exclusion, and her concerns about the contract were being ignored as though they didn't matter. But Maya wasn't someone who gave up easily. She had spent weeks gathering evidence, documenting every dismissive comment, every exclusionary tactic, and every attempt to silence her. Now she was ready to use that evidence, not just to protect herself, but to expose the truth. Late one night, after another frustrating meeting where her voice had been drowned out by louder, more powerful voices, Maya sat at her desk with a determined look on her face. She opened a blank document on her laptop and began typing. Her goal was simple: to create a detailed memo outlining the problematic clauses in the contract and explaining why they posed a threat to transparency and accountability within the company. She included screenshots of the relevant sections, along with her annotations and explanations. She also added examples of similar cases from other companies, showing how such clauses could lead to abuse of power and public backlash. When the memo was complete, Maya reviewed it carefully, ensuring every word was clear and concise. Then she sent it to two groups of people. First, she forwarded it to the advisory board members, including Ethan Caldwell. She wanted them to see exactly what she had uncovered and why it mattered. Second, she shared it with a select group of journalists known for investigating corporate misconduct. These reporters had reputations for fairness and integrity, and Maya trusted them to dig deeper into the story if they saw merit in it. The reaction came quickly. Within hours of sending the memo, Maya's phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. Some of the board members replied angrily, accusing her of overreacting or damaging the company's reputation. Others remained silent, clearly uncomfortable with the spotlight she had shone on their complicity. But it was Ethan's response that caught her attention. He called an emergency meeting for the following morning, his tone urgent and clipped in the email. When Maya walked into the conference room the next day, the atmosphere was tense. The usual pleasantries were absent. Instead, there was an undercurrent of anger and unease. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his polished demeanor replaced by thinly veiled frustration. As soon as everyone settled in, he turned to Maya, his jaw tight. "What you've done is reckless," he said, his voice low but sharp. "You're jeopardizing everything we've worked so hard to build here." Maya met his gaze without flinching. "No," she replied calmly, her voice steady. "What I've done is expose a problem that needed addressing. You're jeopardizing your own credibility by trying to silence people who speak the truth." Ethan's face flushed slightly, but he recovered quickly, attempting to regain control of the situation. "This clause is standard practice," he insisted. "It's there to protect our interests. If you'd taken the time to understand it." "I did take the time," Maya interrupted, her tone firm but respectful. "That's why I'm raising this issue. Protecting your interests shouldn't come at the expense of transparency and accountability, and it certainly shouldn't involve silencing advisors who are supposed to provide independent oversight." The room fell silent again, the tension palpable. For a moment, it seemed as though Ethan might lose his composure entirely. But then one of the other board members spoke up, a woman named Claire who had always seemed neutral in previous discussions. "She has a point," Claire said quietly, glancing at Ethan. "We can't ignore this forever. If word gets out that we've been hiding behind these clauses, it'll hurt us even more." Her comment sparked a ripple effect. Other board members began notifying hesitantly, murmuring their agreement. Ethan's expression darkened, realizing he was losing ground. He tried to steer the conversation back toward damage control, but the tide had turned. Maya had planted a seed of doubt, and now it was growing. Outside the boardroom, the impact of Maya's actions began to spread. Journalists picked up the story, publishing articles that highlighted the unethical practices embedded in the company's contracts. Social media erupted with discussions about corporate accountability, with many praising Maya for having the courage to speak out. Employees of the company, some of whom had long harbored grievances about its lack of transparency, started sharing their own experiences anonymously. Allies emerged unexpectedly, from junior staffers to overlooked shareholders, all rallying around Maya's cause. Despite the growing support, Maya knew she wasn't out of the woods yet. Ethan and his inner circle fought back fiercely, attempting to discredit her and downplay the significance of the clause. They accused her of being overly dramatic, of misunderstanding the purpose of the contract, and even of seeking personal gain. But Maya remained steadfast, leaning on her network of mentors, friends, and supporters to weather the storm. One evening, as she scrolled through social media, Maya came across a post from a young professional who had read one of the news articles. "Thank you for standing up," the post read. "Seeing someone like me, a black woman, refuse to be silenced gives me hope that change is possible." Reading those words brought tears to Maya's eyes. It reminded her why she had chosen this fight in the first place. This wasn't just about her. It was about paving the way for others who felt powerless against systems designed to keep them quiet. As the pressure mounted, cracks began to form within the company's leadership. Shareholders grew restless, demanding answers about the controversial clauses and the negative publicity surrounding them. Internal investigations were launched, uncovering evidence of other questionable practices that had been swept under the rug. Ethan's grip on the company weakened, and eventually he resigned, citing personal reasons. His departure marked a turning point, not just for the organization but for the broader conversation about ethics in corporate governance. For Maya, the victory was bittersweet. While she had exposed the truth and inspired countless others, she also faced consequences. Her position on the advisory board was terminated, and she knew her relationship with the company would never recover. But she didn't regret her decision. In fact, she felt a sense of liberation, knowing she had stayed true to her values. In the months that followed, Maya channeled her energy into something new. She founded a consulting firm dedicated to helping marginalized professionals navigate corporate spaces without compromising their principles. Her work focused on advocating for transparency, equity, and accountability, drawing on her own experiences to guide others. She gave speeches at conferences, wrote op-eds, and mentored young professionals eager to make a difference. Looking back, Maya realized that what had started as a single objection, "This clause is a trap," had become a catalyst for change. By refusing to stay silent, she had sparked a movement, proving that speaking truth to power could reshape the world. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly have challenges, she faced it with unwavering determination, knowing she had already made an impact. The aftermath of Maya's bold stand was nothing short of transformative. For her, for the company, and for countless others who had been quietly watching from the sidelines. The fallout unfolded quickly, like a wave crashing against the shore, reshaping everything it touched. Journalists continued to dig deeper into the company's practices, uncovering layers of misconduct that extended far beyond the controversial clause in the contract. Employees came forward with stories of intimidation, discrimination, and unethical behavior, painting a picture of a toxic corporate culture hidden beneath a glossy exterior. Shareholders grew increasingly vocal, demanding accountability and transparency. The pressure became too much for the leadership team to bear. Ethan Caldwell, once the face of innovation and success, found himself at the center of the storm. His polished smile and confident demeanor couldn't shield him from the mounting scrutiny. As investigations revealed more questionable decisions and secretive practices, his credibility crumbled. Eventually, he resigned, issuing a brief statement about needing time to focus on personal priorities. But everyone knew the truth. He had been forced out. His departure marked the beginning of a new chapter for the company. A reckoning, long overdue. For Maya, the victory came with mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing she had exposed the truth and inspired others to demand better. On the other hand, she faced significant personal costs. Her position on the advisory board was terminated, and some industry insiders labeled her as difficult or uncooperative. Doors that had once opened easily now seemed harder to unlock. Yet Maya refused to see these challenges as failures. Instead, she viewed them as stepping stones towards something greater. In the weeks following Ethan's resignation, Maya began receiving messages from people all over the world. Some were employees of the company, thanking her for giving them the courage to speak up. Others were young professionals seeking advice on how to navigate similar situations in their own careers. There were even seasoned executives who admitted they had turned a blind eye to unethical practices in the past, but were now rethinking their approach because of her example. Each message reinforced Maya's belief that standing up for what was right, even when it was hard, could create ripples of change far beyond what she could have imagined. Determined to turn her experience into something positive, Maya decided to channel her energy into building something meaningful. She founded a consulting firm called Equity Bridge, dedicated to helping marginalized professionals thrive in corporate environments without sacrificing their values. The mission was simple yet powerful: to empower individuals to advocate for fairness, transparency, and accountability in workplaces often resistant to change. Through workshops, mentorship programs, and strategic guidance, Maya aimed to equip people with the tools they needed to challenge systemic inequities. Word of Equity Bridge spread quickly. Corporations eager to repair damaged reputations reached out, asking Maya to help them implement more ethical policies. Nonprofits and advocacy groups invited her to speak at conferences and panel discussions. Universities sought her expertise to educate students entering the workforce. Maya's calendar filled up rapidly, But she remained grounded, always remembering why she started this journey in the first place. One of her proudest moments came when she was invited to deliver a keynote speech at a major diversity summit. The event brought together leaders from various industries, all focused on creating more inclusive and equitable workplaces. As Maya stepped onto the stage, she felt a surge of gratitude, not just for the opportunity, but for the countless allies who had supported her along the way. Looking out at the audience, she saw faces of all ages, races, and backgrounds united by a shared desire for change. "I want to start by telling you a story," Maya began, her voice steady and warm. "It's a story about a single moment. A moment when I realized that staying silent wasn't an option. That moment changed my life, and it taught me something important. Speaking truth to power isn't easy, but it's necessary." She went on to share her journey, the struggles, the victories, and the lessons she had learned along the way. She spoke candidly about the isolation she had felt, the pushback she had endured, and the moments of doubt that had tested her resolve. But she also talked about the hope she had found in unexpected places, the allies who had stood by her, the strangers who had reached out to thank her, and the realization that her voice mattered. When I said, "This clause is a trap," I didn't know it would lead to this, Maya admitted, gesturing to the crowd. "But I do know this. Change starts with courage. It starts with someone willing to say the uncomfortable thing, to ask the hard questions, to refuse to accept the status quo. And when we do that, together, we can reshape the world." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, sparking conversations that continued long after the event ended. People approached her afterward, shaking her hand, hugging her, and sharing their own stories. Many promised to take her message back to their organizations, vowing to be agents of change in their own corners of the world. As Maya reflected on everything that had happened, she realized that her fight wasn't just about one company or one contract. It was about challenging the systems and structures that perpetuated inequality. By refusing to stay silent, she had ignited a movement, inspiring others to join her in the pursuit of justice. And while the road ahead would undoubtedly have obstacles, she faced it with unwavering determination, knowing she wasn't alone. Maya's story became a testament to the power of resilience and integrity. What had started as a single objection, "Excuse me, but this clause is a trap," had grown into a rallying cry for accountability and equity. It proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person's courage could spark a chain reaction, transforming not only their own life but the lives of countless others. For Maya, this was just the beginning.